George Kinder, a very, very warm welcome back to the Humans versus Retirement podcast.
Terrific to be here, Dan. Really wonderful.
George, you are my first repeat guest, and I couldn't think of a better person to have another conversation with than you. So thank you for actually reaching out to me to kind of have this conversation. And I was thrilled when you and your team did, because we are going to touch on something which I think is really profound. That's your new, the 3 domains of freedom. And I really cannot wait to get stuck into this conversation, because you've done such amazing work, as we discussed in the first conversation we had, over the last 30, 40 years. And this book feels like it's the most profound book that you've written, a culmination of all of that work, and asking for fiduciary standards in totality, which I really can't wait to get into. So yeah, I'm looking forward to where this conversation's going, George.
Me too, Dan. I mean, one of the reasons I reached out to you was because I enjoyed our last interview so much, and so similar,
Yeah,
with that. Terrific.
So let's dive right in, George, because the book is fresh off the printing press, has only just been released. Links to buy the book will be in the show notes. Talk to me about how you've come to the conclusion around what the 3 domains of freedom are and why they are so profound to understand and learn about.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Freedom has been the subject of in a way, of all of my books, and yet they've all had different flavors, different approaches. And I think one of the things that I've realized as I've worked on each of them is that there's something different. Like, for instance, in Civilization, we know that democracy brings freedom. At least that's a general assumption among most of us. What does democracy have to do with you're actually living your life dream, who you feel you're meant to be? And when you think about that, well, gosh, what could be more about freedom than actually designing your life and knowing what you're passionate about and making sure it happens, and in short order, so that you're just alive with that experience. But then there's the other freedom, the freedom of moments. Each moment is yours, and that's that's an incredible freedom. Every moment we can choose to just be here, to drop whatever our anxieties are, whatever our preoccupations are, whatever our neuroses are, whatever we're clinging to, we can just drop them. And there's practices to develop each of these freedoms. But what I realized, I've written about each of these, I've thought about each of them, they're all different. They overlap some, but they're really different. And it made me realize that there were 3 domains. And as I looked at my own life, what a thrill it's been diving into one or the other or another, and I'm stumped in one, I'll leap over to the other. So that's why I thought it would be cool to do it. And I did. It's a short book, easy to read, but I think fun, because I think there's a lot of wisdom in it. So it's something you can come back to again and again.
Yeah, I think it's, having read all of your books and obviously been a fan of the work that you've did, freedom is kind of at the essence, the core of everything that you talk about. And actually to hear you frame this in a way that I actually think makes as much sense as I've ever read about the subject of freedom. And it comes back to those 3 domains and the freedom of each moment. Each moment is yours. That the mindfulness needed to think about how to stay in that present moment. And I want to come back to each of these in a second, just to kind of delve a bit deeper. And when we think about also the freedom to pursue one's life, thinking your life is yours, how do we plan and think about our life and take control and of that? And then I think interestingly for me, George, those 2, to me, having read your work, make perfect sense, and I think would make sense to a lot of people reading it. The third one, I think, is probably the most interesting one, and it links into, I think, your call for a global fiduciary standard when it comes to kind of the freedom within civilization. So civilization is yours, your tribe, your social networks, etc. But it goes beyond that. And I think that's a really interesting one that we're going to get into pick the bones out of as we go forward. Let's just focus on each moment is yours, the freedom of kind of each moment, George, with you. And I know you're a master practitioner in meditation and mindfulness, and you've been doing that for so many years. Explain to me a little bit more about each moment is yours and how the listeners can really think about that. The being authentic and having purpose in the present moment, and making sure that they can stay there and understand that it's only the present moment that we've got, and how transformational that mindset can have.
Yeah, I'm going to add something to this a bit. I mean, I'm with you, and I want to go into this, but I want to add something, because a lot of times people go, "Oh, I've tried that mindfulness stuff. I've tried that meditation stuff. It's so hard, I just want to get up and do my emails or go out for a run or whatever it is." And because mindfulness is really about the mastery of the present moment. A lot of people, we talk about it being about reducing stress, about gaining focus, about gaining longevity or better health. All those are true. More patience in your life, a lot of virtue comes out. But what it's really about is the mastery of the present moment. And each of those elements comes as a consequence of strengthening that mastery. So that's why it's hard. The mastery of anything is a challenge, right? I know you're a golfer, so mastering golf, how close can you get and how much better can you get? And it's hard, but with mindfulness, you actually get better all the time. And you might not think it, you might not feel it, but you do, and you can get better throughout your life.
Yeah.
As far as I've gone throughout. So it's pretty cool. And just one more thing that I wanted to share here that people don't really realize. So it's a challenging practice, but if you want to know what the end result is, go out in nature, walk along the beach, take a hike up a mountain. Just go out on your porch and feel the breeze, smell the aroma, of the wild roses or the honeysuckle this time of year, and just feel that ever-changing, fresh quality to life. And that's really what mindfulness delivers in here, inner nature. So you're taking all of that and you're making a discipline so that you can have that inside yourself.
Yeah. It just sprung to mind when you said that. I done that today myself. I mean, I live and work in a very beautiful part of the UK. It's kind of an offshoot of the Thames. It's got it's boating. There's a lovely little kind of rivers and lakes. There's loads of boats down by the promenade and the quays. Like today was it was a hot day here in the UK, and emails were full on. And I went, you know what? I'm just for an hour. It's 10 minutes down the road. I'm walking down there. And just being by water and hearing the laughter of children, and because it's the schools are broken for holidays here, and just sitting down and I left my phone at my desk and just going, this is I didn't even and I don't think we do that enough. And my point I want to try and ask you is, do you think it's as hard as it's ever been to kind of practice that mindfulness and be in the present moment because of how noisy the world has become, with all of those distractions that are now at our fingertips? Is it more challenging now, do you think, than maybe 30, 40 years ago?
I think it's really interesting. That's a great question. And I think it's both more challenging and more rewarding.
Yeah, and more necessary, I think, as well, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think some of those challenges means that we've developed greater complexity and greater ability to handle complexity than we had in the past. So as we master the present moment, we have much more to call on to be very skillful at it. But it's harder because the pull of that of scrolling on that device is so intense.
Yeah. And just one final point on this as well. I think that you mentioned about this kind of being in the present moment is probably the only place that you find true authentic, being truly authentic and having purpose in that present moment. And I remember on the last episode, you shared that story, how you ask audiences, when was the last time I think you should retell the story. And it's a trick
Sure.
question that you say, but, I think it's really important to understand that you can only be truly authentic and purposeful in the moment, right?
Yeah. So one of the beauties of the mindfulness practice is that it's really about experience. And what you were just describing about going out and taking that 10 minutes and hearing the children. By the way, there's a wonderful poem that I just read of William Blake talking about hearing the children on the green and just what happiness that brought him as well.
Mm.
It's the experience, and mindfulness is about fine tuning our ability to experience. So the trick question that I'll ask audience, I've asked it of an audience as large as 1,000, is have you ever, and I tell them it's a tricky question, have you ever experienced a moment of freedom in the past? Like walking, hearing children laughing, being out
Mm.
in nature, making love, doing something extraordinarily creative and entrepreneurial. Have you ever experienced a moment of freedom in the past? And I get everybody to raise their hands. And then I tell them, well, as I mentioned, it's a trick question. You all got it wrong. The extraordinary thing is that we've never experienced a moment of freedom in the past. The only place we experience it is right here and now. And so this mastery of the present moment becomes something that can
Mm.
deliver us freedom, a flourishing of freedom
Yeah.
in our life more and more. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so amazing, and I think starting off with that is obviously the foundation to everything, right? If we can understand and be more present and experience those things, it really sets us up for everything else. Moving to the second domain, which I think is where when we think, if we put this in a financial planning context or working with clients in a financial planning context, this is probably where we do a lot of the work with clients. We try and help them discover some of their some of their present moment and be authentic and purposeful and think about that. But the freedom to pursue your life, that sounds wonderful. And I imagine every listener listening to this wants the freedom to pursue their life as they wish. Your life is yours. Pursue it as you wish. And this is where I think is when we come into that crucial role in terms of planning, the life planning side of things, maybe thinking about what the finances mean to life planning. What are your kind of crucial thoughts around this, and how can people start to take agency over their time and their life and think about how they can take control and make sure that their life is their own?
Yeah, and to connect it to freedom, that first domain is really interesting. I am talking about what we call life planning attached to a financial plan that really works for us. But I want to talk for a moment just personally in my own life. The thing that I think has brought me the greatest thrill, other than being in the present moment and particularly in nature, the thing that has brought me the greatest thrill throughout my life is feeling that I have a passionate purpose that I am moving toward or living in, and that I've embraced, and that so that if I need to wake up or have more energy in my life at any time in a day, in an hour, I can come back to, well, how is your life yours? What is your life purpose? And life purpose sounds a little soft in a way. This is stronger and deeper than that. I think the last time we were together, we talked about how to create a torch
Yep.
so that you feel really alive. And
Mm.
that's really what it's about, is finding the means. And I think we reviewed my 3 questions back then as one of the ways of doing it. But finding the right questions or the right mentor or the right life planner or financial planner who will just be there for you as you explore. Gosh, what would be incredible to live, to feel like I'm either there right now or I'm moving rapidly toward it. That's an incredible experience of freedom that I think
Yep.
every human being deserves.
Yep. I think it's crucial to also understand, and I suppose it's easy to say and kind of feel, but it's crucial to understand the opposite to this, right? And if your life isn't your own, and you feel shackled, or you're just kind of on the treadmill and you haven't take ownership of it and you're not making these decisions, then you have the opposite to freedom, right? I mean, that's and I think a lot of people, given where society's probably gone, is stuck either there or in the middle somewhere and going, well, actually, how do I start to kind of take control of this? And as you said, it sounds soft, but it actually requires some really heavy lifting and some deep, purposeful thinking to be able to go, look, this is what I want my life to look like. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. Here's the steps I'm going to take. You know this as well as anyone, George. Human beings love progressing towards stuff. So we need to make sure that we have got aspirations to keep moving forward. As you said, you're probably more active than you've ever been, right? You're writing books and your poetry and finding new things that engage us and go. And I think when I work with people in retirement, particularly, they've often had quite a suppressed mindset. Corporate world has gotten them down. They haven't been allowed to necessarily explore dreams, be curious. And I talk about being childlike again in that exploration that you can be, right? And I think that's really important when we think about your life as your own. Particularly encourage anyone at any stage of life to think about this. When it comes to thinking about maybe retirement, particularly, it's such a wonderful opportunity to explore this with kind of ultimate freedom again, right? And we know that if you find a brilliant life planner, that can only help and facilitate those conversations and actually probably draw more out of you than you thought you had inside.
In fact, it almost always draws more out of you, and that's really a stunning thing for most people, because a lot of people, I mean, there's kind of a mix that you experience. You experience people who go, oh, I got that down pretty well, and I know what I'm doing and what I'm after and all. And then you've got this other group that you were just talking about, where I'm not sure. I don't know what my purpose is really, and how do I find it? And I mean, life's okay, but so those are the two kind of extremes that we see. And what's astonishing is that first group that feels that they've nailed it, they've already got it. I've never failed to see, and I've watched. I've coached people going through this process, and I coach people who become financial life planners, and I watch them working with someone who thinks they've got it, and it's never failed that there's something missing. There's been something that person hasn't lit up yet, and that they really would just love or would have loved, and they closed off somehow. And so in a process, and you're right, if you find someone who's skilled, trained, someone you really connect with that you feel will support you around all those things, that maybe you know that you've got some of those things and you just don't really want to talk about it, but you feel that this person you could talk with, man, go for it, because your life's going to change, and suddenly you're going to see colors that you never saw before.
Staying with this, because I think it's such a crucial part. I know you've written a lot about in the book as well, kind of about time. And when we think about, and your three questions that we explored is very time based in terms of thinking about forever, thinking about a 5-year window, and thinking about tomorrow, right? So they're very time based questions. When it comes to kind of planning our lives and again taking control and thinking these things, how important is it for us to kind of shorten these time frames in order for us to think, well, actually this is achievable and we can do this? Because I think one of the problems I see with people is they often focus on a too longer time frame and therefore feel like they've got all the time in the world, or they can't, and it often time passes by when time isn't important to you, it will just pass by and go very quickly. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about shortening time and how people can think about shortening time to be able to kind of really kind of take control of their life.
It's really it's a critical thing and a wonderful thing at the same time. I might have mentioned to you that I got long COVID. I was one of the first people to get COVID, and it never went away. Mostly I'm fine, but I have a tremendous fatigue. And when that happened, I realized that I had a few things on my, bucket list or whatever, what was driving me to be the best person I could possibly be. And I realized I hadn't completed them. And my thought was, boy, it's now or never, right? Because you don't know, at
Mm,
that point, we didn't know what COVID was all about and where it was
no.
taking us. So I dove in, man, and the passion and the fire inside of me was extraordinary and gave me a lot of vitality that I didn't otherwise have. The afternoons and evenings were a little bit more, burdensome, but I burned through, and I think I wrote something like 5 books in 2 years. I completed 5 books in 2 years. And these were the books of poetry and photography in nature about how nature brings us alive. And so in when we train financial life planners, one of the things we talk about is how so often people will say, well, I want to do this in 10 years or 15 years, or I want to do it when I retire. So you're all about retirement. But what we do is we say, we'll say, hey, what if you could have that now, you know, or, what would that be like? And often, sometimes you can get it right now. Sometimes something that looked like 30 years out, you can get a year and a half, 2 years. You can get a lot in a very short time frame. If you bring the time frame short enough, you can feel the energy. You feel so
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah.
And often you feel so much more energy to take care of all the tasks that are out there.
Yeah.
And so you do that, and that feels tremendously freeing. And
Yeah.
usually what happens is people achieve a tremendous amount of their life plan within a couple of years.
Yeah. I think you use the word energy is really important here, isn't it? Because if you feel energized to take action because you know why you're taking action, and you've discovered some things that you never thought you could do, that you thought was 10 years away, but you've had a conversation with a life planner and they've gone, oh, by the way, that can happen next week, but there's some heavy lifting to do and you've got to get into the weeds a little bit, but by the way, it can happen next week if we do this. People get energized for that because they just don't know. And then when
Right.
that energy comes through, I mean, that is the part of the torch being lit. And I see it all the time. People go, oh, I think I'm 5 years away from being able to retire and get on my boat more. And you do some of the things and you find out what's really important to them. And you go, actually, by the way, you can do that tomorrow. And like there's tears and there's joy and there's confusion and all of these emotions start flying. But ultimately, it manifests itself into energy. And I do think energy is one of the most important things. I'm starting to read The Secret, which I'm sure you've probably read, right? Or seen. And I think like that, the law of attraction and energy is so important in all of this that we're thinking about.
Absolutely. And keep in mind we're talking about freedom here. And what does freedom feel like? Does it feel
Yeah.
like, oh yeah? I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes when you're working so hard, you're working a really, really tough job and it's 60 hours that you're putting in a week. Freedom can feel like lying on the couch or on a chaise lounge on the beach with your pina colada. But really, if you really think about the experience of freedom, boy, it's alive, it's vital, it's energized, as you say. And that's what we're doing with each of these. So we're stimulating the present moment. We're getting stronger and stronger at our ability to feel that energy. I mean, moments, my golly, they come through like this and this and this. Talk about energy. What could be more
Mm,
energetic than a new moment arising? It keeps
yeah.
happening. We can't
Yeah.
stop it. So here we are now with our life. Let's make our life have just as much of a thrill as that
Yeah.
experience was. Yeah.
And I think as you said, George, the whole freedom concept, freedom of thought, freedom of mind, freedom of health, freedom of time, freedom of, you think of all these things and ultimately it comes down to all of those things. But like you said, it doesn't mean that it's freedom just to go and sit on the couch or lay on the, when I talk to a lot of people that I've worked with, they actually talk about freedom of thought a lot. It's kind of like, actually, I'm not being dictated to how to think and do. I can think and do for to myself. They talk about that freedom of time just to kind of be in the present moment. We talked about being in the present moment. I've talked to a lot of retirees that love Sunday afternoons now because they're not thinking about Monday morning going to work. So they're in the moment and freer to kind of really enjoy that time. So one final point on this I want to touch on with you before we move into the last domain And I think it's really, really important when it comes to feeling free and living that fulfilling life because you are free. It's celebrating achievements. No matter how small they are, I think is really critical to a fulfilling life, and continuously validating that freedom as you kind of move through.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to say as you were talking about all that. It's not the freedom to lie on the couch that we're so much talking about as what is the experience of freedom that you get.
Yeah.
And so the
Yeah.
person that's talking about freedom of thought, there's something that's exciting for them in that. And when you celebrate your achievements, there's again something that's exciting in that process. And that brings us in a way to civilization, I think. How do
Yeah.
we celebrate
Yeah.
that?
Because George, I think just on that, because I think, and I don't want to take this necessarily off into any kind of political debates on anything, but I think it feels like we're at a time, both this side in the UK and in America, where people are kind of questioning being a part of a bigger society, aren't they? It seems more fragmented than it's ever been, probably more angry than it's definitely polarizing. But as you rightly said in your writing, that we need to appreciate everything that has happened and how far we have come. And yeah, there are some bumps along the way, and I'm sure people in these 50s, 60s and 70s had times like this that we're feeling now. So to appreciate and celebrate and understand and be in that moment, I think is really important. And that comes back to your point about civilization and how we need to now probably appreciate it and be part of it. And if we want to make some changes, then we have the ability to be able to do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I think you talk about the fragmenting and the fracturing and the polarization that occurs. It's really troubling to all of us, I think.
Mm,
And I've been around a long time. I've never seen anything like it. I mean,
mm,
I guess the 60s were tough in a lot of ways. And I had a father-in-law once who was an academic dean when the protests were happening. And it was really, really troubling for him in particular, because he was trying to keep things, quiet and copacetic, so to speak. But I've never seen anything like this. And what I want to say that's really exciting is I think there's a solution to it. And I think it's fairly simple. I don't think it's really, really difficult. It's not like everybody's suddenly got to be kinder. I mean, we're going to work on that. We got to work on that
yeah.
because that's going to help a lot. But I don't think I think there's a really simple structural solution to it. And that's one of the exciting things that I reveal at the end of the book. But in order to get there to that place, as you're saying, how do we get to a place where we feel like we can make a change? Again, we can feel like lying on the couch and just surviving, just in thinking about how to make our life ours. But I mean, with civilization, there's 8 billion of us. How on earth can I have any influence? And we know that there are 3 billionaires in America who own as much as half the American population, 150, 160 million people. How on earth can I compete with those? What difference can I make? So it's very easy to fall into almost a codependent kind of space where, oh, well, I guess maybe an autocrat would help, because they'll at least be able to get something done. But I think democracy is an amazing thing. We fought for it. Our ancestors fought for it over the years. It's an amazing thing. And what it really says is that each of us we have a vote, but we also have a voice. That's what freedom of speech is. There are things that have gone wrong over the last 30, 40 years that have taken us toward greater and greater polarization. Those things can be very simply addressed. But the first thing that I recommend, is similar to what you're saying, is celebrate. Look at what freedoms you do have. I mean, here we are, you and I, across, the great puddle there, the huge
Yep.
puddle, talking
Yep.
to each other. I mean, you don't have much hair left, and mine's all white, and I'm not sure how much I got left. And we're probably, I know I'm older than most of my ancestors were. And, we've got glasses and we're able to see. We can fly places. We can get instant medical information. We can, on our smartphones, we can find all kinds of culture. It's celebrate. This is an amazing thing that we have,
Yeah.
civilization. And the other thing is that we don't talk a lot. You were talking about it really a moment ago. You were, I think, alluding to how we were going into these little pockets of difference. That should be something, I think, to celebrate rather than to feel alienated by. Oh, they're different from me. There's kind of a taboo in relation to them. It should be something we're celebrating. And in relation to that, I mean, part of what's happening in the 21st century is the world has grown much, much smaller. We knew it was happening in the 20th century, even more in the 21st century with Zoom and getting wealthier and all of that. And so it's the time for us not to think about ourselves as being white or black or brown, old or young. It's US, UK, Russia, Chinese. It's not that it's time for us to think about our being all together as Homo sapiens, as the human species. This is an incredible thing. We have this incredible civilization that we've delivered. And that civilization is who we are as Homo sapiens. And to the extent that it is polarized, it's angry, it's bullying, it's warlike, it's causing famine, it's corrupt, and all those things. Hey, do any of us want that? I don't think so.
No.
So let's gather together. I mean, it's time for us to gather together. And as I say, I've got a proposal I'll share with you in a moment where I think we can actually make a huge difference in as little as a generation all over the world. So that's my point of view. Let's make it happen. Let's come together. We're one family.
Absolutely. Because I think, as I said 10 minutes ago, the opposite isn't very good, is it? The opposite is everything we're saying that gives us purpose, joy, and we want freedom, and if we go down the well with this and it doesn't deliver us freedom, it doesn't allow us to feel free, because we're constantly going, oh, what's the point? That's corrupt. The news channels are corrupt. They're feeding us this is doing that. I can't say this, I can't do that, I can't be. And that is the opposite to what we know. And it's not just baked in, it's baked in real life experience of our conversations. It's baked in, experiences that you've had with real people. It's baked in science as well. People know how our brains function and what fires where and what, we know that freedom makes us happy, and we know. So we're kind of walking blind into doing the opposite because we're allowing it to kind of like encompass our thoughts, which I think, and I'm not perfect at all. I fall foul to this a lot, and I have to remind myself, because I do think, as I said, it's a very noisy, always on, unfiltered, everything's there world, and it can get to us. But like you say, I do believe we can take it upon ourselves to be able to think about this. And the story that comes to mind for me is that, well, there's two things really, and I know it kind of hopefully will lead into where you're going to go with your proposal. That kind of, when they say put the oxygen mask on yourself first before someone else, right? That thing. So, let's if we can change ourselves, then we've got the ability to do better elsewhere. I think too many people maybe focus outwardly and go, I need to do 1,000 people. I don't know how to do that, but do you first. And it's that starfish story as well. It's, the boy chucking starfishes back into the sea on the beach, and someone comes up to him and goes, oh, you're never going to save all of them. And he picks one up and chucks it in. He went, well, I saved that one. So it's kind of like, let's do this one at a time, because if we do it one at a time, it becomes 1,000 at a time, it becomes 10,000 at a time. And the movement and the conversations and the words will be more impactful.
Absolutely. I mean, here I am, I'm sitting here and I'm just celebrating you, man. You're so alive with this, and you're doing such an incredible job. You've got the mic there, and you're making these podcasts happen, and you're delivering them to people, and you're known for it, and people look for Dan's podcasts, and there you go. I mean, it's, you're making a difference in civilization, and I got my book behind me.
It's really interesting though, just on that. And I know, like, the original premise, George, of these podcasts, really, and I know people would start listening to them, but I was like, how can I become a better person and learn from some great minds? So it's come actually from a very foundational place. I'm like, I'm putting conversations out into the world, but I'm actually doing it because I feel like I'm having great and I'm learning and I can then experience that. I think maybe the same with writing a book. A lot of people write a book because it's a great way to get their thoughts, their experiences down. And then, oh God, it just so happens that impacts 1 and 10 and 1,000. And it always starts with, as you come back to freedom, it always starts with you, right?
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, yes, absolutely for me and writing my books, but I think it's really important for whoever's listening to know it's happening with you right now. How
Mm.
you make a difference with people in your lives, with your kids, with your family, with your friends, with your community. And it can go all the way to the whole world if you so choose to do some things that are that large. But it doesn't matter. If all of us are pitching in to make the world a better place, it's going to become a better place.
Yeah.
This isn't where I'm going. That isn't where I'm going. But that's an
No.
important element because you need to have that sense of confidence and celebration
Yeah.
that you do make a difference and you can make a difference. To look at this final piece that I'll share.
And I want to kind of say to everyone listening that what you're going to say now, I know you are deadly serious about, right? This is stuff that you're taking as high as you can take this with governments and everything. So this is something that isn't just words in a book. This is something that you're deadly serious about engaging. So I can't wait to hear it from.
Yeah. So I may have shared some of this before, and there's one story that I typically share, but I think it's so valuable to hear and think about. Here we are, we have these incredible things. We've got, automobiles that can take us all wonderful places. You're going on a great holiday soon, Dan. And I mean, going to a place that your great grandparents never could have imagined seeing probably in their
Mm-hmm.
life. And
Yep.
how incredible all of this is. And yet, we think, democracy is amazing. Capitalism, we've got a mixed feeling about right now. And some people have a mixed feeling about democracy. But look, a lot of this happened because capital delivered, entrepreneurial spirit delivered. But here's the thing, if in civilization we could structure, if the way we've structured capital and markets and all were the very best, it started 250 years ago in your country, not in mine, up in the north. This explosion, the Industrial Revolution exploded, and the growth has never stopped. If we had constructed the very best out of that explosion, after 250 years of our developing entrepreneurially these incredible businesses and products, wouldn't we see the very best of humanity at the top of every hierarchy of power? That's the question I ask again and again. Why don't we see the best at the top of every hierarchy of power? And in fact, you and I know it's very difficult to find a single hierarchy of power where we go, those folks have it. And they filter it all the way down. It pretty much doesn't happen. So as I thought about that, I mean, I learned a lot of this just going on this, what I call a world tour. I visited, 15 countries or so, 5 continents, 5 or 6 years ago with the Golden Civilization book that I wrote, trying to find out what every people, autocrats, dictatorships, poor, rich, whatever, democratic, whatever, every people saw as what would be a great civilization, a golden civilization. And everybody said the same thing. And it had all the things that we think about. It had democracy, it had kindness, it had community, it had vitality, it had an end to corruption. It had the thing that was extraordinary about it all was that everything institutional was trustworthy. No corruption. You could trust the news that you heard. You could trust the science that you got. You could trust whatever institution you engaged with. And it made me realize that the one thing that we set up something at the very beginning when you incorporate, and that is that we require, we give to the corporation a limited liability protection. So immediately government is actually interfering with the market right there. But we felt that it was necessary to encourage the growth. And my thought was, there must be something at the base that we didn't do, that didn't deliver a humane structure, a trustworthiness to every institution that we've devised. And I'll just tell you what it is. I have it as a kind of a legislative proposal, which I've put in my book, and you can find it probably online in a few places. And what it does, it just simply says, hey, if you're an institution of any kind, corporate, nonprofit, governmental, that you're required, we're going to make this law, you're required to have a fiduciary obligation, fiduciary standard of relationship to the planet and to humanity, and to all of those things ahead of your own self-interest. Okay, Adam Smith and the Industrial Revolution started with this place of self-interest. It's been incredible. It's been incredible. But now we're seeing some problems with it. So just at the base, you can have all the self-interest you want, but you can't have the freedom of that self-interest. You can't violate or harm democracy or the planet or people around you. So it's a very simple legislative solution, and I'm promoting it everywhere. And I intend to build a movement. I mean, I will see what I can do, but already I have people saying, hey, I want to be part of that. And I'd like to, if you do workshops or anything, can I do something? It takes first, I'm looking at, let's get a vision going. So a whole bunch of people all over the world say, that sounds right. I'd like to see that happen.
I think that's the profoundness to that. If your life's work has culminated in a paragraph that has that much impact, which I know you're going to get huge amounts of buy-in and movement from, then I think that's such a wonderful culmination of everything that you've kind of worked for and believe in. Because I do think you're right. I think as you said, in this modern world, lies become the truth. And they want people to believe the lies. It's very easy to make those lies, or to make anything, right? Forget, to make any statement spread, that, it's very easy now to, and I do see a problem with people believing stuff that they read, right? It's kind of, we, in one way, we don't trust them, but in another way, I think we're more gullible than we've ever been as a human species, because we're just reading something online and going, oh, that must be the truth. It's come from a big corporation that turns over loads of money, that's got thousands of employees. Why would they ever want to lie to us? But we know through time, the food industry is a big thing, right? There's huge amounts of self-interest in the food industry that has caused a lot of people to fall foul of that, right? And we know that they promoted sugar ahead of fats for their own self-interest and worth. And look where that's, obesity problems globally. And so there's so many numerous examples out there now, which I think if we can get this through, and I do think it starts at the bottom, as you say, George. It starts with businesses like mine. It starts with businesses like yours. It starts with every financial planner out there doing this. It starts with small businesses on high streets and local parades and shopping malls around the world to start to incorporate this. Employ 10 people and get to know this. They speak, they do. It's a movement that can really take hold. And I do think that you will see people navigate to do business with businesses that subscribe to this standard very, very quickly. Because as you know, doing the research, I think people are calling out for it, because they are now going, I don't trust, I don't want to do business. People are already voting with their feet about who they do business with. They want more sustainable products. They don't want, businesses that are run badly. They're boycotting TV channels and stations over who they, how they broadcast the news. So I think there's a huge demand for a fiduciary standard across the globe, as you know.
Yeah, you touched on so much there, Dan. That a couple of things I'd just like to draw out a little bit more. The one is this question of truth and lies, and people all over the world are really upset about that. And it's not just, we tend to experience it more in the corporate life, I think, and even in nonprofits, which is stunning. But of course, you go to Russia or China or a dictatorship, and of course, they're just getting one brand of news that's coming out to them. And if it's blared out there enough, you think it's reality. And so you are happy with whatever's happening, but you don't know. And so the standard of truth that I'm talking about, I finally, it took me a while to realize this. In my book on the golden civilization, I have a whole chapter on media, but I didn't speak then to what I am speaking to now. And that is that I think the truth means the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So when a media speaks, when a corporation speaks, when the nonprofit speaks, when government speaks, boy, we want to be able to trust that. So what's the context? What's the bell curve of this? And and we need that. And I think the other thing about fiduciary in America, I don't know if you realize this, but fiduciary is a big term in America.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a term in the financial advice industry that is controversial, and it has a polarization to it. And the advisors who are financial planners, who are investment advisors in a broader sense, tend to be fiduciaries. And then there are people who primarily are selling product. And you've got the same split in the UK in a way. It's not so much focused around this thing that we call the fiduciary standard. But so what happens is we end up butting heads with another form of advice. But really what's going on is that there's a certain group of us that is holding to a fiduciary standard, and it's the product companies, it's the big institutions that aren't holding to a fiduciary standard. And so they're the people that are selling the product are subject to that. We shouldn't be polarized with our brothers and sisters. It's getting the institutions to, in fact, buy in and understand that they have a fiduciary responsibility to society, to civilization. And it means to tell the truth. It means to respect democracy and the planet and humanity.
George, I think that's a brilliant place to wrap this conversation up. It's been so wonderful to talk to you again. I can't wait. I've had snippets of the book. I said to you actually before we went on air that I ordered it. I'd hoped to have read it before we spoke, but it's coming on holiday with me. It's due to land from Amazon tomorrow. So because we got this in quite quick, which was because we wanted to have this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for writing the book. I can't wait to be part of the fiduciary movement with you, and hopefully people kind of get on board. I know they will, and I know your energy, as we talked about before, will kind of, and the law of attraction will manifest and make this happen. So congratulations on writing something great. Thank you for all the work you do. Thank you for joining me. And I reckon at some point there'll be a third episode with us too, right? We're going to have to just we'll keep talking.
Yeah, it'd be a thrill. Let me know how you experienced the book, and if there is anything in there where we didn't really look at this, and it would be exciting. Yeah, exciting to go
Absolutely. Again. No, we'll do. And links will be, as I said at the start, links to George's new book and all of his other amazing books will be in the show notes. And that just leaves me to once again thank everybody for joining me on the Humans versus Retirement podcast. Until next time, take care.